and welcome to this week's edition of the Construction CPA's Coffee Cafe. I am the Construction CPA, Lisa Raish. We are dropping the hammer on cash flow problems so you can build things that matter. So, this week's topic is going to be how to keep your construction business liquid. So, this is going to be all about cash flow. And why do we want to talk about cash flow, which is the lifeblood of your business, of course, but we just want to talk about how to keep your how to keep and maintain healthy cash flow we're going to talk about doing things like forecasting, managing your accounts, and then for many of you who are in seasonal parts of the country, really navigating those seasonal fluctuations, especially when it get to the winter time, it gets a little cooler, so your work might slow down. How to really navigate those changes where it's not necessarily fluid or flat throughout the year. So, why is it so important for us to talk about cash flow and cash flow forecasting? We talk about that a lot on here for a reason. Cash flow challenges are one of the primary concerns in construction. It's one of the biggest concerns that we see across the board with all of our clients, whether a client is navigating a short term cash situation, which may happen. Some clients have more long term cash situations, which they're trying to get out of. So it really is something that needs to be addressed on a regular basis because it is one of those items. It is the lifeblood of your business. It really is. So, why is it so important to have accurate forecasting? So, what is cash flow forecasting? I mentioned we talk about it a lot on here. It's not your budgeting, it's actually forecasting out where your cash is going to kind of come in and go out. So it's not your budget. I'm budgeting X dollars every month. No, I actually know these things. Dollars are going to come in here, they're going to go out there. So that's the difference between forecasting your cash and really having a budget of what you're going to spend. It is a forward-looking tool. So we do it with clients typically at the least on a 13-week basis. If a client has run into a cash flow challenge, forecasting your cash out for 13 weeks is vital, right? You want to see that you're going to run out of money on week 5. It's not really, in many cases, if a client has an acute cash flow challenge, we want to be able to see that. It's important to know where you're falling on a monthly basis, but really that 13-week in and out. I believe I'm going to collect this invoice here, that invoice here, this one there, and then I need to pay this vendor, this sub, I need to pay payroll, and it's going out. So really, it's looking at the dollars coming in and then the dollars going out. Why does this matter? It will help you identify a shortfall in advance. Again, why do we do cash flow forecasting for 13 weeks? I want to see that you're going to run out of cash on week 6 or on week 9, right? In the middle of a month versus only doing cash flow forecasting on a monthly basis. You want to know these things in advance so that you can make any potential changes or think about making changes to be able to navigate that so that you, in fact, don't necessarily run out of cash in week 6 or week 9 or whatever you have originally forecasted. So you can make decisions based on where you know the cash is coming in and going out. Are you able to hire? Are you able to make more purchases? What projects are you going to schedule? So being able to project your cash out is going to help you to make the best decisions possible. It's always best practice. We talk about 13 weeks, but you also want to forecast out 3 to 6 months at a time, right? So what's the acute need? What's that need in the next 4, 8, 12 weeks, which again is incredibly important. But then what happens after that 3 months, right? What's happening in month 4, month 5? Do we have another challenge? Are we coming into seasonality? Are we coming into winter months where now you won't have as much cash coming in because you're not working as many projects and so on? So it is best to, again, you start with the 13 weeks, but going out 3 to 6 months is incredibly helpful. You're going to use your historical data. What do you know? I have invoiced out these 6 invoices. When do I think I'm going to get paid on those? I have all of these expenses in accounts payable I need to pay. When do they need to get paid out, right? So when is my cash coming in? When is it going out? And again, you're also going to think about now when you're forecasting out your 13 weeks or even your 6 months. Again, we just mentioned seasonality. Are you going to come into a period where there isn't as much coming in, but what's still going out, right? You're going to still have those operational expenses that come in every month, regardless of whether you're working. So you want to use your historical data, but also your seasonality, right? Do you have trends around the seasons when you slow down? Again, wintertime is a big one for many businesses. Even if you aren't in a cold climate area, most construction usually slows down in December and into January. People aren't necessarily renovating their kitchens in December as they're heading into the holidays, and in some cases don't really have a lot of cash after the holidays, etc. So, do you have those seasonality, those trends in your business? You may not, but you want to think about those things. Where do you think you might slow down so you can kind of get ahead of that need to put additional cash out that may not in fact be coming in? And you also want to think about your project timelines when you are, in fact, building these forecasts out. Are you getting close to the end of a project? Are you starting a project? Are you starting a project that's going to require you to outlay significant expenses to get those initial materials in place, right? So, those are all the things that you want to think about. That 13 weeks, that 6 months, you're going to use your historical data. Do you have seasonality? Do you have cold weather months that you have to think about? Do you have projects stopping? Do you have projects starting? Are you in the middle of a project? Do you have a project that's just stalled for whatever reason, right? These are all things you want to think about when you are developing out your cash flow forecast. So what kind of tools do you want to use? So you can use a spreadsheet. That's usually what we start with when we work with clients is we start them on a basic spreadsheet showing you the cash coming in and out. It does work. Again, it requires the manually entering the information in, moving it around, and so on. There are accounting softwares out there. There are, again, needs like anything else. They are not 100%, so they're going to require you to put some inputs in order to get the output that you're looking for. There is no one is better than the other. A smaller entity may, in fact, want to use a spreadsheet. It may not need to do anything elaborate. A larger entity may want some sort of accounting software in order to do this. So, as with anything else, we always recommend that you consult your CPA or your EA or the bookkeeper that you're using to find out what tools they might be using, what tools they might recommend, the best way to get started, if they can help you with it or they can do it for you. So again, there are a couple of different options there. We typically start a client out on an Excel spreadsheet. Why? We want to get them in the habit of actually pulling that information together and knowing what we need in order to really develop that out to see where the cash is going to come in and where the cash is going to go out. So cash flow. It's not just doing the forecasting. It's really, are you managing your receivables and your payables, right? So are you managing your accounts receivable? This is you actually getting paid. Are you managing your accounts payable? This is actually you paying other people, right? So what do you want to do with your accounts receivable? You want to invoice promptly. You want to do it clearly. If the customer has a specific way to remit invoices to them so that you in fact do get paid, you want to make sure you follow the steps that the customer has for in fact getting paid. In many cases where we see problems with clients getting paid is they're not following the process that the customer has for them to in fact get paid. So you want to invoice them in a timely fashion. Don't wait, 6 or 8 weeks to invoice, in most cases on that monthly basis, and make sure you're clear with what your process is and what their process is so that you can in fact get paid and you don't hold up getting paid because you did not follow their process. When it comes to you getting paid, you need to have more than one way to pay. The days of just accepting a check are long gone. So you're going to need to think about an electronic means for someone to pay you, whatever that happens to be. offering ACH, offering some sort of credit card payments, whatever that is. Find the right tool for you, but you do need to offer more than one way for your customers to pay. If you make it hard for them to pay you, it's going to take you longer to get paid. You're going to want to use some sort of contract terms, some sort of progress billing. For those of you that are in larger projects, you're typically invoicing out on a monthly basis. Ensure you do, in fact, invoice on a monthly basis so that you can get that invoice in and then you can get paid. So you're not waiting till the end of a project to get paid. You're getting paid at certain points, whatever the milestones may happen to be. And you want to make sure with anything else, you want to follow up consistently and do it in a professional manner. So however you're invoicing and however you're communicating with that customer, make sure you're going back and you are following up with them regularly to, in fact, ensure they did receive your invoice. They received the invoice and they have everything that they need in order to pay you. You follow up and ask them, you have everything. What's the status of payment? What is the expected payment date? And you're doing this gentle nudges, emails on a regular basis, but you've got those scheduled out. I send an invoice on day 5, day 10, day 13, however it is, but you have a system and you consistently follow that system, is that will help you to get paid in a quicker fashion instead of, oh, I sent an email on day 10, then I didn't send another email until day 25. And no, if you're sending those consistent emails regularly, just following up with whomever on that side, on their AP side to get paid, just ensuring you've submitted everything appropriately and what do they think the expected payment date is. Again, just following up, letting them know that you're still there. And of course, if maybe you in fact did not submit something correctly, it gives you the opportunity now early on to say, oh, I didn't submit this one item. Let me get you this one item so that I can ensure that we get paid. So let's talk about payables. This is you actually paying people, right? So you need to prioritize based on your due date and your importance. So who's or what's the most important in the next 2 or 3 weeks, especially if now you've hit a cash flow crunch? Who do you have to pay, right? Who's important to pay? Which ones are due? So now this is where you start to prioritize what is going to go out based on how important it is to you. And so going back to the Excel spreadsheet, this is where we go back with clients and now we're asking the question, okay, client, you owe this one, this one, this one, these are the dates you owe these things. How important, on the scale of like 1 to 7, who's the most important to be paid, et cetera, and really mapping that out and determining where and when you're going to pay these certain items, especially if you've run into a cash flow challenge. If you have the ability, try to negotiate terms, especially with your suppliers or maybe with your subs. Some of our clients, depending on the type of work that they do, their subs know that they will not get paid on their invoice until our client actually gets paid from the customer on the project. So you've negotiated that in advance before the work has even started, for example. Or your materials vendors, right? Do you have payment terms? Can you negotiate the payment terms out a little bit farther? Is that an option? If you can, at times where cash allows it, can you take advantage of an early payment discount, right? That might be a good option for you at certain times of the year, maybe when you are flush with cash. That isn't always an option, but maybe it is, right? So you want to consider that. Instead of paying it at 45 days, maybe at 30 days you get a discount. So what does that look like if I pay that invoice at 30 days versus 45 days? And with anything else, you want to make sure you avoid any unnecessary late fees. So really think about, when are things due? Who are they due to? Am I incurring additional late fees on paying that invoice 5, 10, 15 days late, so on? Again, if you are incurring, you really don't want to, but is there a way for you to eliminate and just say, let me pay that on time. I don't want to incur any more fees. If I do that, then, am I moving something else farther out on my cash flow forecast to accommodate the fact that I don't want to incur late fees on, these 3 invoices, for example. So you're going to hit, many of you, because a lot of you are in seasonal parts of this country. It's going to get cold during, in the wintertime. So things are going to slow down. So you're going to hit seasonal slowdown. So kind of how do you dealing with that seasonality? What does that actually really mean? So you need to plan ahead. In most cases, you know when the slow season is coming because you have history in your business. And even if you don't have history in your business, for example, if you are located in a cooler climate, you know that November through March, it's going to be cooler. You're going to slow down. You know that in advance. So if we have history, let's look at what has historically happened in those slow seasons and what can we learn from that. And then moving forward now, in the warmer seasons, and again, I'm making assumptions here that many of you are in, seasonal areas, and I'm using that as an example, but when you are flush with cash in busier periods, are you building up that cash cushion, that emergency fund, right? For that, well, not only just the emergency fund, but that cushion for, I have more cash, for example, in the summer, I need it to last through the winter. So, how am I using that cash so that it lasts me through those cold months, right? So, you're planning ahead. You're looking at where your slow periods may, in fact, be, and what do I need to get me from point A to point B through that slow season. Now you're going to think about your projects too and kind of the timing on those projects. So, do you have the ability? Let's just say, can you schedule a project maybe in an off season or a slower season for you, right? So maybe, for example, I'm going to use the winter as an example again. Can you schedule inside work for those colder winter months, right? Where you don't have the ability to be outside. So can you adjust the timing of your projects so that you are, continuing to work, having dollars coming in, so on through those slower months? And if you can, you might, if you have the ability to, depending on the type of work you're doing, can you kind of put certain types of projects together at certain times of the year so that you don't have your labor or your team members who are sitting there idly, like really nothing to do? Or, your equipment is not doing anything. Do you have the ability to kind of put things together at certain times to keep people and equipment, et cetera, and working? You might have the ability to here and there kind of cut your costs at certain times of the year or certain periods. So, for example, you would not expect to have things like overtime, et cetera, during a slow period. So, again, you shouldn't have those. Those are places where you could potentially cut. You might have overtime over your summer months, but going into the winter, really, it should just be your basic hours. No overage is there. Are you the type of business where you have some level of inventory on hand? Are you keeping some level of inventory, you know, for in storage for the next project? Do you have the ability to reduce that inventory, right? Not buy as much in order to kind of cut some costs. And one of the things that you might want to consider also is the difference between renting a piece of equipment and actually buying it. So if you're just renting it, you're renting it for the times that you are in fact using it. If you've purchased it, now in most cases, you probably have a note that you're paying. So you're paying this note or this loan on a monthly basis. So is there a way for you to kind of cut that out and say, well, we're not going to actually buy the equipment. We're going to rent the equipment instead. So again, those can be sometimes small cost cutting measures that you can use, but in that will help you with your cash flow forecasting as well. And in some cases, some of you I've noticed, especially on our side, you might actually take those slower seasons to build up your pipeline of your work for the next busy season. Do you have the ability to nurture some of your leads, right? Some of your warm leads for that next season? Do you have the ability to do maybe maintenance for people or off-season services? For example, a number of our construction clients who are slower in the winter time. If they are in cold climates, they may be plowing in those winter months, right? So again, there's an opportunity potentially to do some additional smaller types of work during those slow months to help you with your overall cash flow. But then all of these things that we just talked about, you're in fact projecting them and then forecasting them into your cash flow as you move forward. So kind of what are today's takeaways from this topic? it really is that you have to do planning in advance, right? You need to take your historical information. That means you need to have some good, solid historical books to work from, as along with what you already know from your own personal history, and really mapping out that cash coming in and that cash going out, using that seasonality in that cash flow forecasting as well, but really getting, and you can get down to the minutia into that weekly, which will really help you combat, especially if you're in a slow season right now, whether it be something happened in your business or you're just physically in a slow season. It really helps you to navigate those slow periods and navigate the lulls in that cash flow so that you can get ahead of it, and then really think about when do we expect that next slow season to be, and can we start to put some money away for that next slow season. So as always, we look forward to seeing you here every Friday. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.